books that make you cry. Over the past few months, we've been doing a series of videos called recommending books with insert theme here. And the essential premise of these videos are recommending books, obviously.
Shocker, you didn't see that one coming, did you?
Based on questions that we may have gotten as former booksellers. You were a bookseller for a lot longer than I was, but questions that even you may ask if you go into a bookshop and you want to talk to an experienced bookseller, and maybe booksellers have the ability to sort of build a little database in their brain. We kind of did, of how to maybe group some kinds of books together and what these books do to a reader. And since we are readers of multiple genres, we can, I guess, focus in on certain things that a book might do across all genres that satisfy readers of any taste, and may even help readers that read inside one genre branch out. That was a lot of...
You're doing what I do.
Yeah.
Great.
So this is a list of books that make you cry.
Quick disclaimer, obviously all the themes that we are doing in this series are going to be a little bit subjective. This one is particularly subjective because everybody's going to be different in terms of what hits you in the feels and the emotions. So as always, we're trying to be as diverse as possible in terms of the types of books that we're showcasing here, but ultimately you might pick up a book here and it won't make you cry. Also, when we're saying making you cry, it ultimately just means making you sad. It doesn't have to mean making you cry literally, because not everybody cries easily. The second thing I wanted to say...
I cry like a baby.
I do.
Yeah, you do. You ugly cry.
I ugly cry. I actually don't ugly cry that often.
No, but you have.
But when I do, I really, really do.
There's one book on your pile that you ugly cried.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Heaving.
2 of them. Yeah. It was concerning for you and me.
So I actually cry more at movies, because for me a big thing is seeing people's reactions, and also music does a lot for me with emotion. Reading books is a little different. However, there are certain books that have sucked me in so much that maybe they choke me up more than make me cry. Not to sound all manly, but if you see me watching movies, you'll see me cry.
For me as well, just in terms of setting expectations of what kind of books I have picked, and maybe for you it's similar, I think long series or series in general are more likely to get me to cry in later books, because there's been a lot of time spent with characters, falling in love with characters, with the world. So if something bad happens to them, it'll impact me more emotionally, and for several reasons. One being that I feel like it's kind of cheating. It's still impressive to get me to cry, but it's not based on that one book. It's based on everything that led up to it. And secondly, I want to avoid like spoilers in terms of, oh, the 7th book in this series really got me, because then I feel like it sets the expectation that that particular book is going to have a significant character death or something like that. So I have mostly picked standalones here, or like a first book in a series, because I think if the first book in a series makes you cry, that is a similar kind of achievement as like a standalone.
Yeah.
But yeah, just as a heads up, there are books that have made me sob uncontrollably that are not on this list because they're like book number 6 in a series or something like that.
There's 2 books on this list that are potentially the first books that ever made me cry, discounting maybe some parts of the last Harry Potter book. This, I think, might have been the first one. I can't remember which one I read for. Anyway, shut up. First book is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, which I originally read on an e-reader, and I finished this book at like 3 a.m. in the summer on my great-grandmother's bed in Spain. I know exactly where I was because it got me. You know those books that capture you in a way, they keep you up, you're sucked in. I'm not saying that this is a tragic book and everybody dies. It is a bit of a tragic book. But friendship and the struggle of friendship and friendship being torn apart and those themes tend to really get to me in books. And there's actually one that I haven't included on this list, which is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, which also got me all choked up. But I might save that for future videos in this little series. Kite Runner is about two young friends in Afghanistan in the 70s and how their lives intertwine and then diverge as they grow older into the 21st century, I believe, or maybe it's the 90s. Oh, I think it's the 21st century. All about the shifting culture and political climate of Afghanistan throughout the late 20th century. How Afghanistan was a very progressive country in the 70s and has essentially been decimated by extremism and occupation and interference from other countries, and all of this messiness, religious extremism, political extremism, all of this stuff that has just fucked with people's lives in Afghanistan over the last 50 years. And at the heart of this story are two best friends, two young boys. And I don't know, just gets to you. It really gets to you. And Khaled Hosseini writes friendship, possibly better than most writers that I've read. That's a sweeping statement I'm making in this video now, but I know that this is what sticks with me with Khaled Hosseini. So yeah, The Kite Runner kept me up all night when I was reading it. I remember exactly where I was, and I remember that well, maybe I didn't cry, but I choked up, and it was difficult to speak. It's one of those books that, yeah, it's just one of those books.
Well, we promised you a diverse list here, so the first book that I'm going to talk about is 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Don't worry, it gets more diverse from here. But this is the book that I think of when I think of books that made me cry. There are many books that have made me choke up. There are a select few books that have made me properly cry, and this is probably the one standalone that has made me sob to the point that I had to stop reading because I couldn't see the page. And the themes are very similar to The Kite Runner, which I have also read and loved. It's a book that I think everybody should read, to be honest. But
I haven't read that one.
You will love it. The focus here is women. So again, it's set in Afghanistan, a similar time period. I think it starts in the 80s. And we have two main female characters from two generations that are both navigating life in Afghanistan at that time and navigating the changing political situation and with it the changing obstacles and dangers that they face and the relationships that they have for better and for worse, and that they eventually have, or the alliance that they have between each other. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's one of my favorite books that I have ever read, and it's so impressive. Like it's not that long of a book, and he manages, like you said, to portray friendship and relationships between people so vividly and so believably with very little time and page count, and it just pierces you right through the heart. He's very, very talented, and I wish he wrote more books. It's been a while since he's published something.
He only has 3, I think.
He only has 3. But yeah, I cannot recommend this book enough. Both of them, they're incredible. And if you like reading, you like stories, and you like reading books where you forget that you're reading a book, he's an author for you.
They were major bestsellers, but I think they're those kinds of bestsellers that, they're
Yeah.
just good books.
They're just great books. Yeah.
Moving away from Khaled Hosseini and moving away from Afghanistan to Nigeria. Nigeria in the 1990s, actually, but this was written maybe about 5-6 years ago. I'm not too sure. This is The Death of Vivek Oji. The title of this book might be a spoiler if you care about that kind of thing. But this is about the week leading up, or the weeks leading up. I can't quite remember how much time it is. But the weeks leading up to the death of the main character, who is Vivek Oji. This is by Akweke Emezi, a non-binary author from Nigeria. And Vivek Oji is a young Nigerian man in 90s Nigeria who is transitioning to a woman. And as a trans woman in 1990s Nigeria, very religious Christian Nigeria, let's just say they have a tough time. There is an element of mystery surrounding the death of Vivek Oji, where how exactly do they die? But essentially we just get their internal thoughts, their life, their day-to-day. And the kind of lead up in the time period coming up to a very sudden death, which happens at the very end of the book. You always know that it's coming, and I think that is part of the tragedy of reading all of the events leading up to it. The issues with their family, the issues with friends, with loved ones, romantic partners, struggles of identity and culture and sexuality, struggles with a religious family, this kind of thing, in a setting that honestly I didn't know a huge amount about. This is one that has also, by the end, it really does make you choke up if you have a heart. So yeah, The Death of Vivek Oji by Akweke Emezi. Also a very short book. I read this in a day. You'll read it quickly. So there's that one.
Moving from Nigeria to Boston, the next book that I want to mention is Mystic River by Dennis Lehane, which is a book that I've mentioned multiple times on the channel. It was my second favourite read of last year, 2024.
One of my favourite books.
One of your favourite books. One of both of our favourite writers.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I need to tell you that it's a crime book because you would expect me to tell you that it's a crime book, and because that is a section of the bookshop where you'll find it and the kind of tags that you'd see if you look for it online. But I think it's one of those books that is just a book. And I think that putting it in a genre box does it a disservice and would potentially discourage people that aren't into like murder mysteries and like crime and thrillers from picking it up, because you might imagine that it's something that it's not. Dennis Lehane generally writes crime, but he ultimately is writing about people. He's writing about people, he's writing about class, not always, but often it's an undercurrent of his themes if it's not the main one. He is writing about people trying to make the best out of their life and often failing and often being set up for failure by the environment that they happen to be born into or raised in. And that is Mystic River. Yes, there's an inciting incident with a mystery, a crime that needs to be solved, and that is kind of where the story starts and the through line of it all. But ultimately we're exploring three boys that then grow up to be men who were friends, and something happened when they were kids that made that friendship kind of fall apart and drift apart, and now they're three men that have made their different paths in life, but they're intertwined and they can't quite escape their past. And it's a very tragic book. He writes it beautifully. I think Dennis Lehane has, once again, a way with words that is quite simple, not very flowery or anything like that, but he has an ability to just get you to understand what he wants to say. I think this is a beautiful book. I think you don't really need me to tell you a hook or like anything like that, because it's not about the plot. It's about how it feels to read it, and it has this quality of a Greek tragedy, I think, at times, where you can feel that this is not going to go well, and that the characters know that it's not going to go well, but they don't have the ability, the means, the will, you name it, to stop it and make a different choice. It's a great book. It's just a great book. It didn't make me sob, but it got me emotionally when he wanted to get me. And for that reason, it belongs on this list. And I would very, very highly recommend it to anybody.
Going from Boston to Los Angeles, we have Taylor Jenkins Reid with one of my favorite books of the last 5 years, I think. This is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which was a TikTok book, a big TikTok sensation, which
Look at us.
is generally not something that would necessarily lead me to picking up a book. Not to disparage book talk or anything like that. But The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is another bestseller that is just a great book. Mm-hmm. This is about a former Hollywood starlet from the 50s who is given an interview to a young journalist, a young woman. I think it's actually in New York where she's given the interview, but she's talking about her life in Hollywood and her 7 husbands, and all about those relationships and maybe some friendships and why there were 7 of them and going into all of the glitz and glamour and drama of Hollywood. But this is very human and grounded in love, in friendship, in just people trying to live as they want to live without judgment. And I think Taylor Jenkins Reid has an ability to deceptively suck you in to her stories, mm-hmm. because the plot is also really riveting. Mm-hmm. It's an absolute page turner. You just want to know what happens next, and the fact that she tells you the story of the 7 husbands. It's split up into like 7 main chapters, and that structure just kind of makes it really, really compelling, really gripping. So there's an element of like, it's kind of thrilling too, but it's also very, very sad. And I think that's all I need to say about that, as Forrest Gump once said. So yeah, 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I think it's a modern bestseller that I think is well worth reading, mm-hmm. With plenty to say, and it does it while also being very, very entertaining. So yeah, there you go.
It's an extraordinarily accessible book that doesn't sacrifice any depth for being accessible.
It is compulsively readable.
Yes, that's the best way to describe it. Traveling from LA to Alaska upside down, I want to mention Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and kind of by extension, I guess, The Realm of the Elderlings. But this is the one that I mentioned that I put on here. It's a long series, and she's made me cry many times. But that did make it onto the list because she made me cry within like 150 pages of Assassin's Apprentice.
Cry real hard. Yeah.
Honestly, if you're a fantasy reader, you will know of Robin Hobb, have heard of her or read her books and have an opinion, and it doesn't work for everybody, obviously, like most things. But what I think Robin Hobb does so incredibly well, and that also makes her different from other fantasy, is that in this book and this first trilogy specifically, she has a first person narrator, but she has an incredibly well fleshed out cast of characters around Fitz, even though we're always just in his head. And we do have a skewed perspective because we only know what Fitz knows, but we also only have Fitz's thoughts and assumptions about other people. And I think that just puts you in his head so effectively that it can backfire if you don't like him, if you don't connect with him, and it might not work. But if you do, it is one of the most immersive reading experiences that I have had, with fantasy in particular, but I would say in general as well. And it makes it so deeply emotional because you kind of become Fitz. You become the main character, and everything that hurts him hurts you. It certainly hurt me very, very much. And I love the way she makes me cry. I can always rely on that. I'm very excited to reread this series one day, sooner rather than later, and see if those moments change, if I cry less or more, or just at different times. But I think ultimately why she makes it onto this list is that I think she makes me cry in particular, but not with cheap tricks. She often makes me cry with small moments rather than like big dramatic deaths, like you were saying, like people's reactions to bad things happening rather than the actual thing itself, or how people feel, like how Fitz feels, or other characters in other books of hers, in a certain moment of desperation that doesn't necessarily have to be like somebody dying. Also that, but you know. So it just feels like a very, very real emotion, and I absolutely love it.
There's also a difference as well between, like obviously we're listing out books that make you cry, that it immediately makes you think that they're sad.
Mm-hmm.
But something can also just make you emotional because it's beautiful.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily mean it's sad, but quite often these books are sad.
Or they have sad elements to them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to necessarily be the ending of the book.
Yeah, so not all of these books are just like tragic misery. There's beauty, and there's love, and there's things that just make you emotional.
Those are actually, like, that is a taste thing as well.
Yeah.
They're the kind of books that make me cry more than just books that are pure tragedy or pure misery.
Pure misery doesn't make me cry.
Because then you're just desensitized.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of painfully sad, this one is sad. This is a sad one. This is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, which I don't know why the cover is just this barn, but I kind of like it on this Penguin Modern Classic.
Me too.
I also like the other cover with just the two lads sitting there with like corn in their mouth. Anyway, Of Mice and Men is another story about friendship that punched me in the gut. This is set during the Great Depression. It's about two mates looking for work, walking around the American West. George and Lenny, I can't remember which one of them it is, maybe Lenny, has a learning disability.
Lenny, yeah.
And he is treated with such unkindness by the people they encounter, and he's a harmless person, and it's about how kindness is always treated as a weakness and as something that bullies will use against you, and how the world often, not always, but often will make good people do something bad because they need to survive. And this is a very sad book. I do not want to spoil anything about this book, but if you haven't read John Steinbeck, he tends to write about these kinds of things. his books, in my opinion, are just about the importance and the value of kindness. And value not in a monetary sense, very anti-monetary, actually. That, yeah, this book is a classic worth reading. There you go.
Speaking of classics, we are now going all the way to Russia.
One of the biggest books ever written.
War and Peace.
A book so big they split it into 3.
I feel like this is slightly cheating in the sense...
Let me show off our edition. We have a box set, Every Man's Library, which they split into 3 volumes. 3 500-page volumes. Give me a break.
I actually read it in 2 volumes. Because
Yeah.
I read a different edition. I read it in German. That's random information.
There you go.
There you go. So I feel like this is cheating a little bit in terms of what I said at the beginning of the video of like, oh, I'm not going to do series because that's kind of gets you because of the amount of time that you spent with the characters. Well, with War and Peace, you're kind of reading a series. It's just technically one book. But the word count is enormous. So a part of it is just the fact that you've spent so much time with these characters that become real people. But the reason I wanted to put it on this list is because I wanted to include a classic and I thought about it for about 15 seconds and immediately what came to mind was War and Peace. I do want to give an honourable mention to A Tale of Two Cities, but that's a little bit more personal. But War and Peace is one of those classic, emotional, epic stories that just sweep you away if you let it. And if you accept that there are times when Tolstoy is just going to give you his opinions about the Russian countryside and
or give you a history lesson.
A history lesson about the Napoleonic Wars, that's going to happen. And you just accept it and you go with it. But if you're along for the ride, what a ride it is. There's nothing that I can say or that I need to say about War and Peace in terms of what it's about or its plot or anything like that. But just in terms of the emotional impact of this story, I just think you see this vast set of characters go through so much and go their different ways and intertwine and then separate again and get back together and separate again. And it's like weaving this tapestry of a story. And inevitably, you have your favorites that you latch on to and people that you like more or less, and then you like them and then you stop liking them because they're doing stupid things. It's a wonderful story. I think it's a very old school kind of story, not in terms of, oh, it's a classic of the 19th century, but more in what I mean is like the kind of tale that you would imagine people would tell each other around a campfire, just, a lot longer. But there's a particular like character and moment that I won't spoil, obviously, that really, really got me. And I don't think I was expecting that from War and Peace, which feels kind of ridiculous because I'd read Tolstoy before and he does that very well, just this quiet reflection and quite understated drama, but the drama is there. I think it's a book that you should tackle at some point if you like reading and you like books. If you're intimidated by classics or by long books, maybe work up to it first. But if you're a reader and you love literature and you love books, War and Peace is one that at some point is definitely worth reading, and it will probably make you emotional at some point.
Next, I'll mention a writer that is very popular here on BookTube, but I haven't really talked about all that much, and it might surprise you that I've read several of his books. I grew up reading them, actually, thanks to my old man. And that's Stephen King. And this is The Green Mile, one of the saddest books that I've ever read.
Speaking of sad.
This is sad.
This is sad. This is the second sad book in a row.
Maybe a lot of people here on BookTube know The Green Mile. Maybe you've seen the movie. I read and watched the movie. Read this and watched the movie. And both make me cry. The movie makes me cry more because... Don't put the hang over my head, boss. Oh my god. And the music, Thomas Newman's score. But the book is also extremely sad, extremely well written. Stephen King, on occasion, can really, really tap into your emotions. When he dispenses with his weirdness, he can really get you in the feels. And again, this one, it's because there's a friendship at the heart of it, and there's just good people trying to bring kindness to a world that doesn't allow kindness to flourish, or doesn't necessarily reward kindness. In fact, it punishes kindness. So similar to Steinbeck in a way, Stephen King does actually kind of do that more often than you think. So yeah, that's The Green Mile. I feel I don't need to give you a premise for this. Maybe everybody knows what this is, but this is about John Coffey, who was on death row for a murder that he didn't commit. I don't remember if you don't know that initially in the book, but one of the guards, Paul Edgecombe, certainly becomes convinced that John Coffey didn't do what he said he did, and a friendship develops. That's all I'll say if you don't know about The Green Mile. So yeah, we kind of get the day-to-day of death row as well. I really like prison stories. I don't know why. I just really, really like prison stories. And Stephen King is very good at them. So yeah, there's The Green Mile. And fun fact, this is the first book I ever bought her.
Yep. On our 4th date.
There you go.
In the shop that we both ended up working in.
Oh.
Pretty cool.
You're going to make people cry.
Next up, I think, is a pretty good example of a book that might get you in the feels, that is not a tragic or sad book. And that is Happy Place by Emily Henry. And now we've actually mentioned this one before in one of our recommendations videos, I believe in the dialogue one.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to avoid doing that too much because we want to give you a breadth of recommendations. But that's just how relevant I think this book is to this theme, and I think it fits into the idea of giving you a diverse group of books to go off for this theme. So the reason The Happy Place is on this list, it's obviously a contemporary romance. It is a second chance romance, which means, kind of descriptively as it implies, that the two main characters, Harriet and Wynne, were together.
Wyndham Connor. His name is Wyndham Connor. I can't get over it. It's a good book though. Connor Wyndham. Anyway, sorry.
They have broken up, and the book is basically about them finding their way back together. And what Emily Henry, I think, does so well with that is that by giving us this second chance romance, she's essentially exploring, or getting to explore, a relationship that is already established. So we're not seeing people meeting for the first time and having chemistry and falling in love, which is a little bit more straightforward. There's a lot of complexity here, and the conflict comes from the fact that, well, something made them break up, right? And the reason isn't like something dramatic like, oh, somebody cheated, or like, oh, something. No, it's a very real reason that isn't like just one reason. It's just people not being able to communicate, and not in a miscommunication trope kind of way, but just it happens, you know?
I think people incorrectly online, at least in some online reviews on Goodreads and stuff, criticize it for miscommunication. It's not that. It is an inability to communicate in a serious relationship.
Yeah.
Which is very common.
Very, very common. So she gets to explore evolving relationships through the fact that, you know, it's a second chance romance. But basically, I think this can apply to like a lot of people. It doesn't also have to be just romantic relationships. It can be like friendships as well. Like growing up, everybody like being focused on their own lives. And there is a friend group here too, and I think the theme like reaches the entire friend group. It's just about people growing up and having their own lives and careers and jobs and anxieties, and kind of forgetting how to be with other people, but also not being able to or struggling with the evolving relationships with other people. And there's just something about that, everything that I just said, that hit very close to home. I'm that kind of age, we're that age. And just this like idea of like, there's a central house here, which is really a small detail of the book, but basically the friend group are going on a holiday that they always go to. It's somebody's dad's house, like holiday home. And they've been doing this for years, and now he is selling the house. So it's the last year that they're going to do this. And that's symbolic for the fact that it's maybe the last time that their friendship is going to be the way that it is, because they're all going off and getting married and having kids and like having a career and all that stuff. And the house is kind of the symbol. And that metaphor really got me, because I struggle with like permanence of things and places. And I was so upset about this house being sold that alone was getting me. But it's that and the whole emotional weight that is behind it, of like symbolizing change. It's basically a book about change, being an adult, being in your 30s, and your priorities in life just shifting, and that can be hard to deal with. And Emily Henry writes it so well, and it's all packed into a nice romance with great banter, with funny moments, with relatable characters, that ultimately is a feel-good book, but it has as much depth to it as you want at any given time to give it. And I think it's her strongest in terms of supporting cast. I was really invested in the friendships here, and everybody has their own personality. It's a great book, and an unconventional one, I think, to make you cry.
Because nobody dies.
Because nobody dies. It's just about the house.
The house dies. Last one I want to recommend. I wanted to include a little bit of genre fiction in here as well, and a sci-fi book, a sci-fi classic. And this one, it's not the entire book that made me cry. It is one specific part. Anyone who has read it will know. That's Hyperion by Dan Simmons, specifically the chapter of The Scholar's Tale, which is so sad. It is a father-daughter relationship with a time travel twist. Kind of, sort of. There may be an element of Benjamin Button going on. Is that spoiling too much? I don't think so. This story is about why one character has ended up on this pilgrimage, on this spaceship to this planet with all of these other people, how they got there, and at the heart of it is a father-daughter relationship, and the lengths that family will go to save a relationship and save another member of the family. So that's Hyperion. Now, Hyperion is a book where Dan Simmons writes multiple genres within this one book, and the overarching story is science fiction. But there's also like regular literary fiction, there's horror, there's military sci-fi, there's a little bit of kind of religious cult horror fiction in here. Yeah, there's a bit of everything going on in this book, but the bit that made me cry is The Scholar's Tale. And yeah, that's all I'll say about it. Don't want to spoil too much. So, Hyperion by Dan Simmons. A pilgrimage of 7 people who are searching for answers, the meaning of life. Maybe there's something going on in their lives that they want to fix, and they've been called to this pilgrimage to meet an enigmatic figure known as the Shrike on the planet Hyperion. There's a lot of poetry references here to Keats' poetry, Hyperion being a Keats poem, and yeah, a lot of emotion, a lot of highly charged emotion, and a lot of people who are lost. That's also something that can make, tap into your emotions of like, where am I in life and all this kind of stuff. So that's Dan Simmons, Hyperion.
The last thing that I wanted to mention is a bit of an honourable mention, and I wanted to give a shout out, I suppose, to YA. Particularly like YA fantasy, YA sci-fi, but it doesn't have to be a genre, just YA in general. Because I find that really good YA, obviously, what it excels at often is emotional investment, because there's a big focus on it. There's a big focus on, through one way or another, get you really, really emotionally invested in the situation or the characters. Sometimes that can be because everything is heightened, so there's like a highly emotional, tense situation, or a very dramatic situation, you know, a revolution, something like that. Or there's very dramatic, like tense relationships, like forbidden love or forbidden friendships, and like this kind of thing that creates a strong conflict and emotional attachment, because you're witnessing somebody go through very strong emotions. I think that is something that YA is very good at when it's good, and that it has a big focus on. And therefore, because there's such a focus on emotional investment over things like form or theme sometimes and stuff like that, I think that great YA is also very good at making you cry, at least for me. So I wanted to mention a couple of examples of YA that has gotten me in the feels. One of them is, obviously, well, you all know, if you watch this channel, that I like the Shadowhunter Chronicles by Cassandra Clare, particularly the Infernal Devices. I think has an element of like intentional stylistic melodrama, because it's a little bit imitating the dramatics of the Victorian era and literature.
I will say the second book in the Infernal Devices made me choke up for very personal reasons. I'll just say Gem. For those of you who have read those books, I related a lot to Gem.
She is very good, I think, at having things in there that you can latch onto, even if you don't relate in a literal way, because obviously there is magic involved. But yeah, the Infernal Devices in particular, I think, are very emotional. I would mention the Aurelian Cycle by Rosaria Munda, which has this kind of dramatic situation. We have a dystopia and a revolution, and like post-revolution all at the same time, and dragons. And I also wanted to mention John Green. I haven't read John Green in a long time, but I read The Fault in Our Stars when it was big and everybody was talking about it, and the movie came out, and I read the book. And I, at that time, had just started my bachelor's in literature, and it made me a bit snobby about this new YA bestseller that everybody was saying was like destroying their soul. And then I picked it up and I read it, and I finished it at 2 a.m. and I was sobbing uncontrollably over that book.
Kids with cancer.
Kids with cancer. I mean, that is cheating a little bit. That is cheating. But that's also what I mean. Like, YA tends to use these really heightened situations that make you extra emotional. And I think John Green is good at that, at least in my experience.
I think you're making a good point, and you've just reminded me now, live. Children's literature is very good at tapping into emotions. And I think if you go back to some children's literature as an adult, you'll see a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And it can be really affecting if you go back to children's literature as an adult. And I just remembered The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which is a book by Irish author John Boyne. That book is rough, and it's obviously set in a concentration camp during the Second World War. But again, another book about friendship. Mm-hmm. And friendship across divides. It's a young young son of a Nazi soldier befriends a young Jewish boy in a concentration camp through the fence. It's even just saying that's a tragic book.
Yeah, and a great example of heightened situation, this like impossible, forbidden, like unlikely friendship, like everything is heightened. So yeah, just wanted to give a shout out to like YA, or like children to whatever, middle grade if you want to call it that, into YA like books, because I do think that if you like that and you're the kind of reader that as an adult would still pick up a book aimed at younger readers, it might be very effective, and it can be very effective at making you cry. As always, let us know if you have any recommendations for us of books that made you cry that you think might make us cry. We like crying every once in a while in a controlled environment and intentionally. So do let us know, and also let us know if there are any themes, any prompts, any specific elements, things, categories that aren't genre specific that you look for in books that you would like us to make a video on.
I think we currently have one more idea for this series, and then we'll have to go through the comment sections of the other ones because some people have made some good suggestions. But please give us more of these. What would you ask a bookseller when you go into a bookshop to buy a book? Something random. I was like, oh, today I feel like reading a book that makes me laugh, or whatever. Oh, there's another one that we should do.
There you go.
But yeah, stuff along these lines. What theme, what kind of weird question or weird common similarity between disparate books would you like to see a certain list of? There you go. Like the video if you liked it. Do all of that YouTubey stuff, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Bye.